A teenager in a designer suit looked at a quiet old man and laughed. He said, "Old man, people like you shouldn't even be allowed in places like this." The entire restaurant went silent. But what that boy didn't know was that the man sitting across from him had once carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire, alone for 6 hours straight. And in just a few minutes, he was about to find out. Music softened slightly. Welcome back, everyone. You are watching Cold Justice, where fiction meets justice, and every story carries a truth the world needs to hear. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, and don't forget to ring the bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. And I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. I read every single one. Now, let's get into today's story, because this one will stay with you. Music shifts to elegant restaurant ambience. It was a Friday evening in the heart of the city. The kind of evening where the air smells like expensive cologne and the chandeliers inside La Maison, one of the most prestigious restaurants in town, cast a golden glow over white tablecloths and crystal glasses. This was not a place for ordinary people. And 18-year-old Ethan Caldwell made sure everyone around him knew it. Ethan was the only son of Richard Caldwell, a real estate billionaire whose name was on half the buildings in the city. Ethan had grown up believing that wealth was a measure of worth, that money bought not just things but superiority, respect, power. He wore a tailor black suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His watch glittered under the restaurant lights, and his attitude, even sharper than his cufflinks. That evening, Ethan sat at the finest table in the restaurant, reserved specifically for the Caldwell family, surrounded by three of his friends, laughing loudly, ordering bottle after bottle, and treating the waitstaff like furniture. Then, he noticed him. In the corner of the restaurant, near the window, sat an old man. He was simply dressed, a plain gray shirt, worn trousers, clean but unremarkable shoes. His white hair was neatly combed. His hands, resting on the table, were rough and weathered, the hands of someone who had worked hard all his life. He sat alone, quietly reading the menu, unbothered by the noise around him. His name was Colonel Daniel Hayes, retired, decorated, and completely unknown to everyone in that room. Music grows tense. Ethan stared at the old man for a moment, then smirked. He leaned over to his friends and whispered something. They laughed. He stood up. He walked across the restaurant, slowly, deliberately, until he was standing right beside Colonel Hayes' table. The old man looked up, calm and unhurried. Ethan crossed his arms and said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, "Hey, old-timer, I don't know how you got a reservation here, but this restaurant is for a certain kind of people. And no offense, you don't exactly fit the part." A nearby couple stopped eating. A waiter froze mid-step. Colonel Hayes said nothing. He simply looked at Ethan with steady, patient eyes, the kind of eyes that have seen things words can barely describe. That silence seemed to irritate Ethan even more. "What, nothing to say? Let me guess, you wandered in here by mistake? Or maybe someone felt sorry for you." He laughed, glancing back at his friends. "People like you belong at a diner on the highway, not here." The restaurant had gone almost completely quiet now. A woman at the next table pressed her lips together, visibly uncomfortable. An older gentleman set down his fork. A young couple exchanged uneasy glances. And still, Colonel Hayes said nothing. He folded his menu, took a slow sip of water, and looked up at Ethan with the same unshakable calm. That composure, that quiet, unbreakable dignity, was somehow more powerful than any words. But Ethan mistook it for weakness. Music builds, deeper, more intense. The restaurant manager, a nervous man named Mr. Ferris, hurried over with an apologetic smile plastered on his face. He leaned toward Colonel Hayes and said, quietly but not quietly enough, "Sir, perhaps it would be best if we moved you to a table in the back, to avoid any discomfort." And for the first time, Colonel Hayes spoke. His voice was low, measured, like distant thunder. "I've sat in worse places than this, son. I'm fine right here." Ethan scoffed. How noble. He turned to walk away, then looked back one more time just to get the last word. "Enjoy your meal, old man, while you still can." His friends erupted in laughter. And just as Ethan was settling back into his chair, feeling completely untouchable, the front doors of the restaurant swung open. Music stops abruptly, then swells into something powerful and majestic. 8 men walked in. They wore military dress uniforms, medals gleaming on their chests, posture perfect, eyes forward. The entire restaurant turned to look. The men scanned the room. Then, the moment their eyes landed on the old man in the corner, something extraordinary happened. As one, in perfect unison, they stopped. They straightened, and they saluted. A full, formal military salute, held in complete silence, directed at the quiet old man in the gray shirt sitting alone by the window. Nobody in the restaurant moved. Nobody breathed. Colonel Daniel Hayes slowly rose from his chair. He acknowledged the salute with a nod. Modest, dignified, the way only someone who has truly earned respect ever could. The senior officer stepped forward. His voice was clear and steady. "Colonel Hayes, it is an honor, sir. We heard you were in the city. We couldn't let the evening pass without paying our respects." Ethan's smile disappeared. One of the restaurant guests, an older man, whispered to his wife. She pulled something up on her phone, and her hand flew to her mouth. Someone else began reading aloud, barely audibly. Colonel Daniel Hayes, 3 tours of duty, Medal of Honor recipient, saved the lives of 11 soldiers in a single mission under direct enemy fire. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan sat perfectly still. The color had drained from his face. Music becomes soft, somber, deeply emotional. One of the soldiers, a young lieutenant, turned and looked directly at Ethan. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "That man," he said, "spent 30 years protecting people he never met. He buried friends. He carried the wounded. He came home with scars, most of which you'll never see. And he never once asked for recognition." The lieutenant paused. "Whatever you said to him tonight, I hope it was worth it." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Ethan had ever heard. He looked around the restaurant, at the faces staring back at him, at the waiter who had witnessed everything, at the elderly couple, at his own friends who were no longer laughing. And then he looked at Colonel Hayes. The old man had sat back down. He was not looking at Ethan with anger, not with triumph. He was looking at him the way a man looks at someone he feels sorry for. That look broke something open inside Ethan. Music is gentle, raw, almost fragile. Ethan stood up. His legs felt heavy. His throat felt tight. He walked, slowly, across the restaurant. Every eye followed him. He stopped in front of Colonel Hayes' table. For a long moment, he said nothing. He was 18 years old, and for the first time in his life, he had absolutely no idea what to say. Finally, his voice came out, small, cracked, nothing like the boy who had walked in that evening. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Colonel Hayes raised one hand gently. "Son," he said quietly, "that's exactly the problem. You didn't know. Not because you couldn't, but because you never stopped to look." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down." And Ethan, the boy who believed money made him superior, sat down in front of this old man in a gray shirt. And he listened. Music swells, hopeful, cinematic, emotional. I don't know exactly what Colonel Hayes said to Ethan that night, but witnesses said they sat together for nearly an hour. That Ethan's eyes were red when he finally stood up. That he shook the colonel's hand, both hands, and held it for a long moment before walking out. Why do know is this? We live in a world that constantly tells us that status, money, and appearance define a person's value. But real worth, the kind that endures, the kind that commands true respect, is built in silence, in sacrifice, in the things no one ever sees you do. Colonel Hayes never walked into that restaurant to impress anyone. He didn't need to, and that is precisely what made him the most powerful person in the room. The next time you look at someone and think you know their story, pause. Because the quietest person in the room might be carrying a history that would humble you to your knees. Music fades slowly. That's the story for today, and I hope it touched something in you, because it touched something in me too. If this story moved you, give it a thumbs up. It genuinely helps this channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Cold Justice, where fiction meets justice, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. Now I want to hear from you in the comments below. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. And tell me, whose story do you want to hear next? A forgotten soldier? A struggling single mother? A silent genius the world ignored? You decide in the comments, and I will bring it to life for you. Until next time, stay humble, stay kind, and never judge a book by its cover.